Kubernetes is kind of, well, it's going through the hype cycle. I think it went through the big hype and down into the trough of disillusionment a little bit. I'm not sure exactly where we are right now, but there's something about it that seems to attract engineers like a moth to a flame. And I guess some of us get a little burned by doing that. But I'm curious, Cory, what, in your opinion, does attract engineers to the land of Kubernetes?
I think it's obviously novel, right? So it's like, I heard this really great quote the other day, like, can you do blank with Kubernetes? It's like the answer is probably yes. With how flexible CRDs are and making your own controllers, it's easy to do anything with it, right? We're seeing ML in it. We're seeing applications in it. We're seeing people start to put VMs in it. You can really do a lot with Kubernetes. The other question I saw in the same quote was, should you do X with Kubernetes? And like that's that as a consultant, that's a hard question to answer. Like usually my approach, and this kind of ties into I think the last question a bit, is like, when you're moving to Kubernetes, it's, have I outgrown what I'm running on now, right? Have I started running into problems that either are too timely for me to solve, or I don't know how to solve, and maybe I can solve that by moving to Kubernetes? More problems once you get there. But I mean, I think it's just there's so much that you can do with it. And the interesting thing is, like, I feel like the community is pretty good and people are building operators for everything. So it starts to seem like it's going to be very easy to do stuff, right? Like I can sit down and just run Cockroach DB and I don't have to know anything. That's fantastic. Like, why would we not do that, right? So I think it's the community excelling at getting all these applications that we normally have to figure out how to run in our own infrastructure easily available on Kubernetes. I think is the big appeal of it.
Right. To a certain degree, it can be the easy button for deploying an application because, hey, I've got a Helm chart that deploys a WordPress site with all the bells and whistles on it, and all I have to do is click Helm install, and I'm done. I win. I can go home. But like that easy button is masking a lot of complexity that makes it actually work. So
guys, we got to emphasize something here for the audience. When the four of us were talking before we recorded this show, one of the points that you made to us that really stuck out was, for almost all organizations, you guys are taking the position that Kubernetes is probably the wrong answer. So you guys seem to feel really strongly about this. And in a way, the answers to your questions so far have kind of been like, oh, this is what it's for and this is how it fits. But you're saying it's what you told us, again, offline, but you told us it's really wrong for most folks. So, come on, man, fire up the guns. And what are we missing here about why people are choosing it when maybe they shouldn't be?
Well, I think more on the hype cycle thing, right? So like why I think it's wrong for a lot of organizations is because, I don't know, a lot of the companies I've been involved in, the number of engineers far exceeds the number of operations staff, right? And so if we start moving to something like Kubernetes and we don't have the operations staff to manage and know how it works, even if you're using like Kubernetes as a service, like there's still operational and maintenance tasks to do. That burden falls on the engineers, right? And at the end of the day, the engineers are supposed to be developing something that creates business value and is tinkering with figuring out how to, let's say, configure pod security policies. Like, does that help? I mean, it makes your applications more secure, sure. I mean, not newer versions of Kubernetes now, but whatever. But like that's the problem I see with it, is if you don't have that good mix of people that you can have focusing on operations, then you're taking time away from engineers when they could be building business value. And I see this happen a lot with startups, right? It's like, oh, we should be running on Kubernetes because that's where we might go in the future, right? That's like, we don't pre-optimize, but we just pre-optimize where we're going to be deploying our applications in the future, right? It's like, maybe just start on something like Heroku or start on a VM or something like, oh geez, I forget the name of the service. App Engine, right? Like something smaller, something you just run your application on, get your MVP out. Don't worry about trying to make this thing scale to infinity yet.
Right. And I think that brings up an important point, that is, there are other options out there when it comes to building something that's sort of cloud native. There's a bunch of different platforms as a service like App Engine, like Azure App Service, like Lambda and serverless that you could choose to build your application on, and then I guess backport it to Kubernetes if it ever came down to it. Is that what you'd recommend for a startup to investigate before they go, full bore on Kubernetes?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. To echo Cory's point, as a startup, you're not, for the bulk of the startups, for 80-90% of them, you're not in the business of operating servers. You're not getting paid to run Kubernetes. You're getting paid to solve some chunk of business value. Especially early on, your whole goal is to prove out that there's a market, that your solution is there, and that people want to pay for it. Anything that takes time away from that risks, the actual ability of your startup to exist as a company. It's absolutely, Heroku's great. App Engine's great. For any of those things, ship it out there. My personal take on it is, if you really want to start thinking about the future and what you do there, adopt the language that will help you down the road without having to redo everything. In this case, it's that containerization piece, right? Don't necessarily go to pure serverless or Lambda if you don't think you're going to be doing that forever. Build a Docker container, throw it on on App Engine, throw it on Cloud Run, throw it on Fargate, and then at least that chunk of it is there. Then you go back to focusing on all your business stuff. And then when you get to that point where you're saying, you know what, we've grown, we've scaled, we really need Kubernetes for these reasons, that piece is done, and you can kind of slot that in and work on all the other stuff you have to develop from at that point.